ESPN dropped some news today about the Alabama coaching search post Nick Saban that I know all of you have seen by now. But most people don't realize what it actually means for Ole Miss and the Crimson Tide right now. The wisdom of the markets would tell you that based on the article that was dropped today, Ole Miss may have an upper hand on Alabama from a coaching perspective right now. How so? I'll get to that in just a moment. Alabama's AD, Greg Byrne, went on record with Chris Lowe to talk about how they wound up with Kalen DeBoer after Nick Saban left. It's really a well-done article that provides it from information from just multiple perspectives, and we'll certainly link it in the description. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you have, but you should go read it if you've only read clips or pieces of it so far. One of the more interesting parts was about the decision between DeBoer and Florida State's Mike Norvell. From the outset, Washington's DeBoer and Florida State's Norvell were at the top of Byrne's list. Both had what Byrne was looking for, a proven head coach who had won on a big stage and shown the propensity to develop players. Byrne declined to go into detail about whom he talked to first or his pecking order, but he had serious conversations with both coaches the day after Saban retired. Now, I do think that we can maybe pause there and say, if he wouldn't go into detail about his pecking order or who he talked to first, we can probably assume it wasn't the guy he ended up with. That's just an assumption. We don't have to go crazy in the arguments, but if you landed your first guy, or if your first guy was the one that you ended up with, or the guy you reached out to first, or was first on your pecking order, why wouldn't you just say that? So let's move on. More of the ESPN article before I upset too many people. Throughout the interview process, Byrne was in contact with Bell as well as with Saban and Mike Brock, the athletics committee chair of the board of trustees. Byrne also dealt with Jimmy Sexton, who represented both DeBoer and Norvell. He skipped down a little bit. It says it didn't really matter, though, because by the time that Byrne was bearing down on his top two targets, he and his wife, Regina, met with DeBoer and his wife, Nicole, on Thursday in downtown Seattle. There were also serious discussions with Norvell that day. In fact, in the wee hours of that Friday morning, the fear among the Florida State officials was that Norvell was getting close to trading his FSU Garnet for Alabama Crimson. Sources told ESPN that Florida State was poised to move quickly if that happened, and that Kiffin would be a prime candidate to replace Norvell. Go check out the rest of that article, but here are my thoughts on it. Now, there's no reason to argue, but I know some of you down in the comments are absolutely going to do so. However, Norvell was absolutely a candidate for Alabama, and this article seems to imply that once Norvell decided he was staying put, Alabama closed in on DeBoer. In fact, if you look at the times, that Norvell said that he was staying, and then the time that it says that contracts were being agreed upon and finalized, there's certainly a timeline that Chris Lowe of ESPN seems to imply. You also look at the fact that, again, we mentioned this, Byrne wouldn't immediately announce or wouldn't say exactly who his top choice was. But the focus of this, what I really want to talk about, is the Lane Kiffin part. Now, I don't know if Florida State would have landed him or not. Ole Miss fans may say, no chance. Florida State fans may say, we absolutely would have had. That's not really important. I know that they would have swung for the fences. I know that they would have made as competitive of an offer as they possibly could. Pulling him out of the SEC would not have been easy, but that part doesn't really matter. He was their contingency plan, and that says a lot. Think about where FSU was just before all of this went down. They had just been snubbed out of the playoff. They had just had an underwhelming signing day where they missed on their 4 top targets, 2 of them flipping away to a rival program and then one of the best programs in the country in UGA. They also missed on the other 2 targets. They were trying to land both a couple of top 5, 10 players in the country. And you also had the fight that they had going on with the ACC. You had the NCAA sanctions that came on just the day before all of this started to go down. They could not afford to lose Norvell. It would have been one more black eye on a program that certainly had had a rough last 6 weeks. But if they had lost him, they had one choice, and that was Lane Kiffin. Now, Ole Miss fans, hear me out. This is what I'll say is really good and really bad about that. The good part, again, is that if you believe in the wisdom of the markets, and you believe in what conventional wisdom would tell you is most of what people think is sought after or desired, I think right now you have a better and a more sought after coach than the Alabama Crimson Tide do. And that's a crazy statement to make after the run that Alabama has just been on. That's a crazy thing to think about after what Alabama has done for years and years and years, having the best coach in college football. What's maybe not so good about that, what's maybe not as comforting for Ole Miss fans is that I think teams are going to continue to come hard after Lane Kiffin over the next few years. I especially think that Ole Miss is going to have a spectacular year this year. I think they're going to do a very good job, and I think that they could wind up in the playoff or beyond. And if that's the case, massive, massive programs are going to be coming after Lane Kiffin. Now, will they hit? Will they be able to lure him away from Ole Miss? I think there are some places that potentially could. There are some places that couldn't. I think UF could have a job open next year. Could UF take a massive swing there? I don't even like UF very much, but I think they're a better program overall than Ole Miss. And what do you do if you're Lane Kiffin and they come after you? Do you want to go try out a rebuild in the state of Florida? Or do you stay at Ole Miss where you're currently having success? What if DeBoer doesn't work out and Alabama comes in a couple of years calling for Lane Kiffin? Does he take that job? What if the rumors of Kirby going to the NFL are true? What if Georgia comes calling? Do you take that job? What if Ryan Day doesn't work out and Ohio State comes calling? I think teams are going to come after Lane Kiffin, and it will be on Ole Miss to absolutely step up and keep him locked in. But for right now, if you believe in the wisdom of the markets, again, we've said that a couple of times, you have a more highly sought-after coach than Alabama does. And I think you have a better coach, a more proven coach, a coach who has a better chance to win the SEC right now than I think even Alabama does. Now, I know that Bama fans aren't going to love hearing that. I know that you guys think that Kalen's going to come in and not miss an absolute beat. Well, put a bookmark in this and come revisit it if I'm wrong, but I don't think I will be. I think if I had to take a guess of what's more likely, does Lane Kiffin go out and get another job at some point, or does Ole Miss just have more success over the next 3 or 4 years than Alabama? I think I'd bet on Lane Kiffin at this point. Florida State certainly did. If Norvell would have ended up at Alabama, they weren't looking at Kalen DeBoer, they were looking at Lane Kiffin. When Florida has to make a decision here over the next year, I think they're going to be looking at Lane Kiffin. When Ohio State invariably has to make a decision, if Ryan Day is not able to get over that Michigan hump, I think Lane Kiffin's name is going to come up again. And I don't know that DeBoer's will. I don't know that DeBoer's would have if he was still at Washington. We'll see how that goes, but I think Lane Kiffin right now has the upper hand. I think Ole Miss has the upper hand in that situation. What are your thoughts? If you're an FSU fan, if you're an Ole Miss fan, if you're an Alabama fan, I understand you yelling at me. I get it. That's fine. This is my take on it. You can obviously come back and revisit it if I'm way off. But let me know your thoughts. Let's talk about it down in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to our brand new channel. We're less than 2 months into this, running right now on college football addiction.